What if the worst birthday gift you could ever receive came from the person you loved the most? And what if that gift was a wish for you to die? This is the story of how my daughter's cruel birthday wish didn't destroy me. It set me free. Welcome to Folktales Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and share with friends. Hello everyone. Please make yourself comfortable. I want to share a story with you today. It's a story about being a mother, about heartbreak, and about finding a strength I never knew I had. It all started on a day that was supposed to be filled with joy. My daughter's birthday. My name is Clara. For over 40 years, my entire world was my daughter, Lily. She was my only child, my greatest joy. From the moment she was born, I lived for her smile. I worked as a nurse for decades, often taking extra shifts, not to buy nice things for myself, but to make sure she had everything she could ever want. My life was a collection of sacrifices, and each one felt worth it because it was for her. The story I'm telling you begins on Lily's 40th birthday. I was so excited. I'd arrived early at her beautiful home in the seaside town of Port Haven. The salt air always smelled so fresh there. In my hands, I carried a beautiful cake from the most famous bakery in the city. It was vanilla with fresh raspberries, her absolute favorite since she was a little girl. It cost me a pretty penny, but for my Lily, nothing was too expensive. I stood on her porch, my heart feeling so full. I could almost hear the echo of her childhood laughter. I pictured her opening the door, her face lighting up like it used to on Christmas morning. I knocked, my smile already wide and ready. But when the door opened, the woman standing there wasn't my little girl. She was a stranger with my daughter's face. Her expression was flat, annoyed. She didn't look happy to see me at all. "Oh, it's you," she said, her voice dull. She didn't even look me in the eye. My smile faltered, but I pushed forward, holding out the cake. The little candles were already placed on top, ready to be lit. "Happy birthday, my love," I said, my voice maybe a little too bright, trying to spark some joy in her. "I brought your favorite, vanilla with raspberries. Just like when you were small." Lily let out a long, heavy sigh, as if my simple gift was a burden too heavy to carry. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her tone dry and cold. She turned and walked inside, leaving me to follow her. She didn't thank me for the cake. She didn't even look at it. I stepped into her lovely living room, my heart starting to feel heavy. This was the house I had helped her and her husband, Mark, buy. I had given them the down payment, $50,000, from my life savings. Money I had saved penny by penny, year by year. This house was built, in part, on my love for her. And now, standing in it, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. We sat down on her expensive sofa. I held the cake box on my lap, a silly, hopeful part of me still thinking we might light the candles soon. "You know, Mom," Lily began, her voice that same cold tone she'd been using more and more lately. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About my birthday. About presents. About what would truly make me happy." My heart leapt a little. Maybe this was it. Maybe she was going to ask for a trip, or a special piece of jewelry. I nodded, eager. "Of course, sweetheart. You just tell me what you want. Anything. You know I'll get it for you." Lily looked me straight in the eye then. And what I saw in her gaze, it froze me to my very soul. It wasn't just annoyance. It was pure contempt. She spoke slowly, carefully, as if she wanted to make sure every single word hit its mark. "The one thing I would love most for my birthday," she said, her voice cold and clear. "The only thing I really want is for you to just die." The world didn't just stop. It shattered. Right there in her perfect living room. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped my heart right out. Her words echoed in my ears over and over and over. "Must die. Must die. Must die." My own daughter. The baby I had rocked to sleep. The little girl I had bandaged up when she fell. The teenager I had stayed up with, worrying. The woman I had given everything to. Had just wished for my death as a birthday present. I couldn't breathe. "What?" I managed to whisper, the word catching in my throat. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," she said, and her voice was like a knife, sharp and cold. "I'm tired of you, Mom. I'm tired of your constant phone calls. Your unannounced visits. You're always here, always bothering me. My life would be so much easier. So much happier. If you would just disappear." My hands began to shake so badly the cake box trembled in my lap. I am 70 years old. I had been her mother for 40 years. In all that time, through all the struggles, I had never ever imagined I would hear those words from her mouth. "Lily," I said, my voice breaking into sobs. "I'm your mother. I've given you everything. I've sacrificed everything for you." "Exactly," she interrupted, standing up from the sofa. "And that's why you're suffocating me. I can't breathe with you constantly there. I need freedom, Mom. I need you to let me live my life without your drama and your emotional needs." The $200 cake was still in my hands. The candles were starting to melt in the warm room, the wax dripping down onto the beautiful frosting. In that moment I could see every dream I had for that day. The hugs, the laughter, a slice of cake shared together, vanishing like smoke. "But honey," I tried one last time, my voice a broken plea. "I just want to be close to you. I just want to be a part of your life. You're all I have." "And that's exactly the problem," she replied, crossing her arms over her chest. A defensive, final posture. "The fact that I'm all you have. Too much. Go get a life of your own and leave me alone." I stood up. My legs were trembling so much I could barely stand. I was still holding that stupid, beautiful cake. Felt like a mockery now. A symbol of a love that was clearly not wanted. "I can't believe you're saying this to me," I murmured, more to myself than to her. After everything I've done for you." She actually laughed. A short, sarcastic, horrible sound. "Mom, everything you've done has been for your own benefit. To make you feel needed. To have control over my life. But I'm not a little girl anymore." I walked toward her front door. Each step felt like I was walking through cement. It felt like it was costing me a year of my life for every footstep. As I reached the door, I turned around one last time. I looked at my daughter. I searched her face, her eyes, desperately hoping to see a flicker of regret. A glimpse of the sweet, loving little girl I knew was in there somewhere. But I saw nothing. Nothing but impatience. She was impatient for me to leave, so she could finally celebrate her birthday without the nuisance of her mother. "Happy birthday, Lily," I murmured. And I walked out of her house, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I would ever step foot in that house as the mother who had sacrificed everything. Because my daughter had just, without knowing it, awakened something in me. Something that had been sleeping for a very, very long time. I drove home from Lily's house that day in a complete daze. The world outside the car windows looked the same streets, the same sea views of Port Haven, but nothing felt the same. It was like a filter had been placed over everything, turning it all gray and cold. I arrived at my small, quiet apartment. My hands were still shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I walked inside, and the silence there felt heavier than ever before. I went straight to the kitchen and without even thinking, I opened the trash can and dropped the beautiful cake inside. It landed with a soft, sad thud. The melted candles were a messy, colorful ruin. I looked at it sitting there on top of the coffee grounds and an empty soup can, and it felt like a perfect picture of my heart. Something beautiful thrown away. I sat down on my old sofa, the same sofa where I had nursed Lily as a baby, where I had read her countless stories, where I had cried happy tears every time she achieved something new. How had I ended up here? How could my own daughter, the child I had carried for 9 months, loved for 40 years, wish for my death with such cold, clear certainty? The tears finally came then. Not gentle tears but great heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the little girl in pigtails who used to think I hung the moon. I cried for the teenager who would tell me all her secrets. I cried for the relationship I thought we had, the future I thought we'd share. It was all gone. As I sat there in the deepening twilight, The sadness began to slowly mix with something else. A need to understand. I had to make it make sense. So I began to remember. I began to add it all up, not just the money but the love, the time, the worry. I got up and went to the small desk in the corner of my living room. In it I kept boxes of old papers. Not because I didn't trust anyone but because I was proud. Proud of all I had managed to provide for her. Tonight I pulled them all out. I started with the big things. I found the paperwork for the down payment on her house. $50,000. A huge chunk of my life savings. Gone in the signing of a single check. I had done it with a happy heart, imagining her building a happy life within those walls. Then I found the receipts from her wedding. I had paid for the whole thing. The elegant venue by the sea, the flowers, the band, the dress. $30,000. I remembered her face, so radiant. "Thank you, Mom. It's perfect," she had said, hugging me. It had felt perfect. I found old bank statements from her college years. She'd changed her major 3 times. Each time meant more semesters, more tuition. I never complained. I took out a small loan against my apartment to cover it. $40,000. "Don't worry, honey," I told her over the phone. "Your education is the most important thing." The memories kept flooding back, each one with a price tag attached. When she was 16 and wanted a specific designer dress for her prom, I worked extra weekend shifts for 3 months to afford the $600 price tag. I sold a necklace my own mother had left me to pay for her medicine when she had pneumonia as a child and our insurance was shaky. Then came the grandchildren. My 2 beautiful grandsons. When they were born, I became the free, on-call babysitter. Every date night, every appointment, every time they just needed a break, I was there. I never asked for a dime. I was happy to do it. Happy to help my daughter have the life she wanted. And just last year when Mark lost his job, who paid their mortgage for 6 months? Me. $12,000 that I took from my modest pension. Money that meant I had to eat very carefully, skipping little luxuries, just to make my own ends meet. And when the boys needed braces, another $5,000 from my savings. "Don't worry," I told them, seeing the stress on their faces. "That's what Nana is for." I sat at that desk with a calculator as the moon rose over Port Haven. I added it all up. The cost of raising her. Nearly $200,000. College. $40,000. The wedding. $30,000. The house down payment. $50,000. The mortgage payments. $12,000. The braces. $5,000. Countless birthday and Christmas gifts over 40 years. At least another $10,000. Total took my breath away. Over $347,000. Nearly $350,000. I had poured almost all of myself into my daughter's happiness. And all of it, for what? To hear that her greatest desire was for me to die. The tears were gone now. In their place was a hollow, aching emptiness. If I had put that money into a savings account all those years ago, with just a little bit of interest, I could have over $500,000 now. I could be living in a lovely little cottage. Could be traveling. I could be enjoying a comfortable retirement instead of counting every penny in my tiny apartment. But I hadn't. I had chosen to invest in love. I had chosen to believe that every penny spent on my daughter was a penny well spent. That every sacrifice was worth it because in the end, I would have a daughter who loved me and would be there for me in my old age. How foolish I had been. How incredibly naive. Picked up my phone. My heart was pounding. I needed to hear her voice one more time. I needed to know for absolute sure that she had really meant those terrible words. She answered on the 5th ring. "What do you want now, Mom?" Her voice was thick with annoyance. She was probably at her birthday dinner, and I was interrupting. "Lily," I said, my voice trembling. "I need to know. Did you really mean what you said to me today?" There was a pause on the other end. Then, cold and clear. "Of course I meant it, Mom. It's time for you to understand that I need space. Your obsession with me isn't healthy." "Obsession." I repeated, the word feeling like a slap. You call a mother's love an obsession? Yes, she said, her voice firm. Exactly that. And I hope that after today you finally get the message. I need you to respect my boundaries and let me live my life. I didn't say goodbye. I just hung up the phone. There was no misunderstanding. No taking it back. My daughter truly believed my love was a burden. My presence in her life was a problem she needed to solve. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows move as cars passed outside. The sadness was still there, a deep, painful ache. But as the hours ticked by past midnight, something else began to grow alongside it. It was small at first, just a flicker. It was anger. Not a loud, screaming anger. A quiet, simmering, determined anger. The kind that comes from being treated unfairly for far too long. The kind that comes from finally seeing the truth. My daughter wanted me to die. Well, maybe it was time to give her exactly what she asked for. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was like a fog had lifted from my mind. The heartbroken, weeping woman from the night before was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone with a purpose. The sadness was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it had been joined by that new feeling. A solid, steady determination. If my daughter wanted me to disappear from her life, then I would. But not in the way she expected. She thought I would just fade away quietly, heartbroken. But she had awakened something in me. The fighter I used to be before I became just someone's mom. I got out of bed and I put on my best clothes. Not my comfortable, worn-in clothes, but a nice pair of slacks and a blouse I saved for special occasions. Today felt special. It was the first day of the rest of my life. My first stop was the bank. I had a joint account with Lily. I'd opened it years ago for emergencies related to the house, and I kept a cushion of money in there. $15,000, just in case something big broke and they needed help fast. "Good morning, Mrs. Evans," said Mr. Henderson, the bank manager who had known me for years. "What can we do for you today?" I smiled a calm, pleasant smile. "I'd like to close joint account number 729384, please." He looked surprised. "Are you sure? That account has a balance of just over $15,000. "I'm completely sure," I said, my voice steady. "I'd like to transfer every last penny to my personal savings account." I signed the papers with a hand that didn't shake. Watching that money, my money, return to my account gave me a feeling of power I hadn't felt in a long, long time. It was a small thing, but it was a start. Next, I went to the mortgage company. When Mark had lost his job, I had co-signed their mortgage to help them keep the house. It meant I was responsible if they couldn't pay. But it also meant I had certain rights. The loan officer, a kind woman named Sarah, greeted me. "Mrs. Evans, how are you? Is everything okay with the loan? I'd like to review the mortgage contract where I'm listed as the co-signer," I explained calmly. "I need to understand my rights and obligations." As she went to pull the file, I remembered the day I signed those papers. Lily had been so grateful. "Mom, you're saving us. You're our hero," she'd said, hugging me. Mark had shaken my hand, promising they'd never miss a payment. Sarah came back with a thick folder. "Here we are. As a co-signer, you're responsible if the primary holders, your daughter and son-in-law, can't make the payments. But you also have the right to be notified of any late payments and, under certain conditions, to take action to protect your own credit." He nodded. "And what would those conditions be?" I asked innocently. "Well, if there's a pattern of late payments, or if the primary holders demonstrate financial instability, you could potentially petition to have the loan modified or even, well, to assume control of the property to prevent foreclosure." I knew Mark had just lost his job again. Lily had mentioned it to me last week, probably hoping I'd offer to help once more. She didn't know she was giving me the key to my own freedom. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, taking a copy of the documents. "That's very helpful." My final stop that day was the most important. I went to see my lawyer, Mr. Wallace. He was an older gentleman, a friend of my late husband's. He knew our whole family history. Clara, he said, standing up from his desk to greet me. It's good to see you. What brings you in? I sat down and I told him everything. I told him about the birthday cake, the cold look in Lily's eyes, and the devastating words. I told him about a lifetime of sacrifices, and I showed him the rough tally I'd done of all the money. His face grew more and more serious as I spoke. Clara, I am so sorry, he said when I finished. I never imagined Lily was capable of such cruelty. Neither did I said. But I've made my decision. I want to change my will. I don't want her to get a single thing. We spent the next 2 hours going over everything. My will, my life insurance policy, my pension beneficiaries. Everything that once had Lily's name on it was now changed. I left my savings and insurance to a local animal shelter I loved. I set up a small trust for my grandsons that they could only access when they turned 25, so their parents couldn't touch it. There's one more thing, I said. I want to start the process to reclaim their house. As the co-signer I have rights. And her husband is unemployed again. Mr. Wallace nodded slowly, an understanding dawning in his eyes. I see. You're not just walking away, are you? You're making sure she understands the cost of losing you. Exactly, I said, a firmness in my voice that felt new and strong. She told me her life would be easier if I disappeared. I'm going to disappear. But first, I'm going to make sure she understands exactly what easier really means. When I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in decades. I had a plan. I had taken back control. I went home and I did something I never did. I poured myself a glass of wine at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I sat by my window, looking out at the sea, and I toasted myself to my new life. Then I did the bravest thing I'd done so far. I got on my computer and I looked up retirement living abroad. I'd always dreamed of seeing Italy, the rolling hills of Tuscany, the art, the food. I'd never allowed myself to even think about it seriously. All my extra money went to Lily. I found a program that helped seniors relocate. I sent an email. My name is Clara Evans. I am 70 years old and I am interested in information on how to start a new life in Italy. After I hit send, I stood at my window for a long time. I was looking at the town I'd lived in my whole life. But for the first time I wasn't seeing it as my home. I was seeing it as my past. My daughter had asked for my disappearance as a birthday gift. And I was going to grant it to her in the most spectacular way possible. She wanted me to die. The mother she knew was about to. And a new Clara was about to be born, far away in the sun-drenched hills of Italy. She had no idea that her cruel wish was about to become her biggest regret. The next few days were a whirlwind of secret plans. It was like I was a secret agent in my own life. Every morning I woke up with a mix of nerves and excitement. The pain was still there, but it was being overshadowed by the thrill of taking my life back. I started quietly packing. I didn't need much. Just my most precious things. Photo albums, a few pieces of jewelry from my mother, my favorite books. Everything else was just stuff. Stuff from a life I was ready to leave behind. In the middle of all this, my phone rang. It was Lily. For a second, my heart leapt foolishly. Maybe she'd had a change of heart. Maybe she was calling to apologize. How wrong I was. Mom, she said, her voice all business. No, how are you? No, I'm sorry. I need a favor. I almost laughed. The audacity. What do you need? I asked, curious to see how far she would go. The boys have a school play on Friday night. Mark and I have a work event we can't get out of. Can you come watch them? There it was. The same old pattern. My feelings didn't matter. My heartbreak didn't matter. What mattered was that I was available to help. I took a deep breath. I can't, I said simply. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the phone. What do you mean you can't? She asked, her voice laced with disbelief. She wasn't used to me saying no. I have other plans, I said. What plans could you possibly have? She asked, and I could hear the eye roll in her voice. That condescending tone that said my life couldn't possibly be important enough to interfere with hers. Plans that don't involve you, I said, keeping my voice calm. You'll have to find another sitter. Mom, be serious. I can't find a sitter this last minute. And since when do you charge me to watch your own grandchildren? And there was the guilt trip. The weapon she'd used for years. But it wouldn't work this time. Since you told me the best birthday gift I could give you was to die, I said, my voice cold and clear. If you want me to disappear, I'm starting with the free babysitting. She was silent for a moment. Then she let out a sarcastic laugh. You're really going to be this childish? I thought you'd be over your little drama by now. It's not drama, Lily. It's self-respect. You wanted me gone. I'm going. Fine, she snapped. Be that way. But don't come crying to me later when you're lonely and bored. She hung up. That conversation was the final confirmation I needed. I wasn't making a mistake. The next day I went back to the bank and I did something that felt incredibly daring. I withdrew $20,000 in cash. It was a big chunk of my savings, but I needed it for my new start. I put it in a secure envelope and hid it away. My escape fund. Then I called the relocation agency. I'd like to book a one-way ticket to Florence, I said. My hand was shaking, but my voice was firm. The ticket cost me $2,000. It was the best money I'd ever spent. I needed an accomplice. I decided to tell my next-door neighbor, Betty. Betty was a fiery, wonderful woman in her 60s who had seen me come home crying after visiting Lily more times than I could count. She'd always said I was too soft on her. I went over to her apartment with a bottle of wine and told her the whole plan. Her eyes got wider and wider as I spoke. You're a genius, Clara, she finally exclaimed, clapping her hands together. It's about time that ungrateful girl got a taste of her own medicine. What can I do to help? We hatched our plan. Betty would be my inside woman. She would wait 2 days after I left, then go to Lily's house. She would act worried, saying she hadn't seen me, that my apartment was empty. She would hand-deliver the letter I was about to write, the most important letter of my life. I spent that entire night writing. I poured my heart out onto the paper. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply stated the facts. My dearest Lily, it began. You asked me for a birthday gift, to disappear from your life. I am finally granting your wish. I detailed everything. Not just the big money like the house and the wedding, but the little things. The prom dress. The sold necklace. The missed mortgage payments. I explained that love shouldn't come with a price tag, but respect should. And she had shown me none. I included copies of the legal documents, the change to my will, the notice about the mortgage, the closed bank account. Your life will be simpler without me, I wrote near the end. But it will also be much more expensive. I hope the simplicity was worth the cost. It was 15 pages long. It was my truth. The day of my flight arrived. Betty came over at 5 a.m. with coffee and a huge, supportive hug. You've got this, Clara, she said. Go have the adventure of a lifetime. Taxi arrived. As I put my suitcases in the trunk, I took one last look at my apartment building. I'd lived there for 20 years. But I felt no sadness leaving it. Felt free. The flight to Italy was long. For the first time in 40 years, no one knew where I was. No one could call me to ask for money or a favor. It was the most peaceful feeling I'd ever known. I arrived in Florence. The travel agency had a driver waiting for me. He took me to a small, beautiful apartment in the heart of the city, with shutters on the windows and a view of a little piazza. It was perfect. I was exhausted, but I was there. I was in Italy. I had done it. The next day, I knew Betty would be playing her part. She would go to Lily's and deliver the letter. The storm was coming. But for the first time in my life, I was nowhere near it. I was safe across the ocean, sipping espresso in a sunny Italian cafe, ready to start my life over. My first few weeks in Italy were a beautiful blur. Everything was new and exciting. The language, the food, the sound of church bells echoing through the ancient streets. I enrolled in a beginner's Italian class. I joined a group for expats and went on walking tours of the city. My calendar, which for years had been empty except for visits to Lily's, was now full of things I wanted to do. But I knew back home the storm had hit. My phone blew up with calls and messages. I ignored them for a few days, just letting them pile up. Finally, I turned it on. There were over 50 missed calls and countless messages from Lily. The messages told a story all on their own. They started with worry. "Mom, where are you? Betty is here with some crazy letter. Call me." Then they moved to anger. "This is ridiculous. You can't just leave. You're being so selfish." Then finally to panic. "Mom, the bank called. What did you do? We can't afford the mortgage without your help. Please." I finally answered one of her calls. "Mom, where are you?" she screamed, her voice hysterical. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said calmly, looking out at the Florentine hills. "Far away from you, just like you wanted." "But I didn't want this," she cried. "I didn't want you to actually leave. I was just stressed. I didn't mean it." There it was. The classic Lily move. Try to take back the cruelty by calling it stress. "You sounded like you meant it," I said. "You sounded very sure. Please just come back. We need you. I need you." It was amazing. Now that the money was gone, now that the free help had vanished, suddenly she needed me. "Do you need me, Lily?" I asked. "Or do you need my money and my free babysitting?" There was a long silence. That silence was her answer. Hung up. I had nothing left to say to her. Over the next few months, through emails from my lawyer and updates from Betty, I learned what happened. Without my financial help, they couldn't keep the house. The bank foreclosed. Lily and Mark had to move into a small rental apartment. They both had to get jobs. Real jobs, not the fancy ones they'd had before, to make ends meet. They were finally living the life they could afford on their own, without my subsidies. It might sound cold, but I didn't feel happy about their struggle. I just felt calm. I felt that justice, in a strange way, had been served. They were finally facing the consequences of their own choices. I, on the other hand, was thriving. Without draining my savings for Lily's emergencies, my money was actually growing. I'd sold my apartment back home through my lawyer, and the money was transferred to my new Italian bank account. Between that, my pension, and my savings, I was more than comfortable. I made friends. I traveled around Italy on little trips. I learned to make fresh pasta. I dated a lovely Italian gentleman I'd met in my language class. For the first time since I was a very young woman, I was living a life for Clara. A year after I left, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, but it wasn't Lily's. It was my grandson's. He was 13 now. "Dear Nana," it read. "Dad told us why you left. He told us Mom said really mean things to you. We miss you a lot. We're sorry. We love you." It included a drawing of me with a thought bubble that said, "I'm in Italy," and a smiley face son. I cried when I read it. But they were healing tears. I wrote him back. I told him I loved him and his brother very much, and that when they were old enough, they were always welcome to visit me. I told him to always remember that words have power, and to use them for kindness. That letter was the only thing that connected me to my old life, and it was the only part one wanted to keep. It's been 3 years now. I'm sitting on my little balcony in Florence, looking out at the sunset over the terracotta rooftops. I'm 73 years old. I have friends, a fulfilling life and peace. I never got a real apology from Lily, and I've made my peace with that. Some people never change. But I changed. I was broken down to nothing, and from that nothing I built a new, stronger, happier me. My daughter's wish for me to die was the worst birthday gift I've ever received. But in the end it was also the best, because it forced me to finally start living for myself. She wanted the old, sacrificing Clara to disappear. And I did. And in her place, a new woman was born. A woman who knows her worth. A woman who is finally, truly happy. Thank you for listening to my story.